Welcome, everybody. I'm so happy you've been able to join us this evening. Bienvenue à vous tous et toutes. Je suis Linda Leith, présidente de Linda Leith Édition and Linda Leith Publishing. And here we are. We have a lot to celebrate this evening, both individually and collectively. For this is the 10th anniversary of the first ever LLP launch at Blumette, which took place originally, the first one in April of 2012, when we had just 2 books to launch. Felicia Mihai's novel, The Darling of Kandahar, and journalist Rick Salutin's essay, Keeping the Public in Public Education. And we also had a packed room in the hotel where Blue Metropolis took place at that time. Last year, for reasons we all know too well, the festival was cancelled, and we are celebrating the fact that Blumette is back, this year in virtual form, and so are we, along with the writers that we published a year ago, and those we have been publishing in the year since then. So this is a celebration for and by the hugely talented, courageous, and exciting authors and translators that you will meet this evening. Je suis ravie de vous accueillir tous et toutes à notre lancement ce soir. We have a special Blumette promotion on now on our website, by the way, lindaleith.com, with a discount code MET2021 for the books, which we hope you will buy after you've heard some of what these writers and translators will have to talk about and read this evening. And Paragraph Books has a window display and has all of these books in stock at the moment on McGill College Avenue. So you can pick up copies there. Linda Leith Publishing is situated on land which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and Anishinabeg nations. We honor and respect the diverse Indigenous peoples connected to this territory and respect the continued connection with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within this community. We're starting off our program this evening with 2 writers, Stéphane Martelly and Adam Leith Gollner. They are first up, and I think they will appear on screen right now. Hi.
Hello. Hi, Linda.
Bonsoir, Stéphane. Hello, Adam.
Hello.
Bonsoir. Bonsoir à tous et à toutes.
Bonsoir.
Stéphane Martelly is the author of Little Girl Gazelle, a really gorgeous and inspiring work for children aged 4 to 8, illustrated by Albin Christen and translated into English by Katia Grubisic, whom you will meet a little later in this program that we have for you this evening. Né à Port-au-Prince, Stéphane Martelly habite Montréal depuis 2002. Elle est professeure à l'Université de Sherbrooke et à Concordia, et elle est lauréate du prestigieux prix Michel Tournier pour son premier livre pour enfants, La maman qui s'absentait. I'm going to introduce Adam as well, and then I will pass it to you, Stéphane, and then to Adam. Montreal writer Adam Leith Gollner's first book, The Fruit Hunters, which was published by Scribner's in 2008, was a national bestseller and was adapted into an award-winning documentary film. His follow-up, The Book of Immortality, also with Scribner, won the QWF Mavis Gallant Prize for nonfiction. His writing appears in many different publications: the Paris Review, the New York Times, Vanity Fair, the Smithsonian, the New Yorker Online, and most recently, in fact, I think yesterday or so, in GQ. He's here to present his new and delightful and a very amusing book, as well as a wise book, Working in the Bathtub, Conversations with the Immortal Dany Laferrière. Stéphane, please start us off.
Okay, well, thank you for inviting me to this beautiful event with such amazing writers. Today I will be speaking about my book, Little Girl Gazelle, which was first published at Premier Ménage under the title L'Enfant Gazelle. It is really a book that I wrote as part of a series that I'm writing right now of short narrative stories that are written in a very poetic language and then illustrated by somebody that I really like. Here it's Albert Christen, who did a wonderful job illustrating L'Enfant Gazelle and then Little Girl Gazelle, as you can see. So it is a fable. I consider it a fable about discrimination and the difficulties that parents have trying to speak to their children and explain away something that truly does not make sense, which is why there are inequalities in society, and to prepare them for the world. So I'll just read an excerpt, which is the beginning of the book. From Belly days, her father told her she'd never have time to learn to walk. But her mother had raised her by the feet, told her, you are a gazelle child. And even if the race has begun, you will run, and you will get there. She believed her, of course, each word a truth. She believed him, of course. Her feet seldom touched the ground. She believed them as she had taken aback the world, uninhabitable, just as she would believe forever in her own impossible speed. So what is truly amazing about this experience for me is working with such wonderful creators and collaborators. You know, Albert Christen did such a fantastic job translating the complexities of the story and illustration, which are black and white for most of them, and lightly peppered with the small steps of the Girl Gazelle. And also Katia Grubisic, who did such an amazing job translating what seems to be simple enough, but is truly a very difficult text to translate because it is poetic. And so it has to relay both rhythm and meaning and color and intent and very subtle things that she was able to capture in her translation. So yeah, that's what I can say about this book. I'm here to answer questions if you have any. Adam, your mic, I think your mic is...
Can you hear me now? May I ask a question, or should other people be asking questions?
Do whatever you want.
I was just wondering if there was an example of one of these translations that you found was successful, but also created a new meaning.
Oh, we worked so closely together. I think maybe the new part of it was maybe the title, because I think there's a subtle difference between L'Enfant Gazelle and Little Girl Gazelle, and Katia had suggested a few of them, but I chose with her Little Girl Gazelle because to me it resonates with the words of Nina Simone, Little Girl Blue. So there was a hint there of what was inside the book in that choice. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. it's such a pleasure to work with somebody who's really sensitive, you know, had this poetic sensibility. Both Albin and Katia really did. I was very fortunate in that regard.
Great. Are we?
Yes,
Shall there be questions from others?
No, I think they're waiting for you to talk about this.
They're
book.
waiting for me. It's my
I know the author. I know the author, so I'm very impatient too to hear what you had to experience.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll maybe pick up on what we were just discussing, which is how I don't know. Are you guys hearing an echo, or is that just me? Anyways,
no, I don't hear
it. But I'll try to ignore it. But I'll pick up on where the point you just made about how translation works with poetic language, because I certainly experienced that and felt that working on this book with Danny. Now, here's another question. On my screen, this is backwards.
No, it's fine for us.
Okay, it's crazy. So you see, in the echo chamber of my own computer, this is, you know, illegible, but I'm happy you can read it. There you go, translation. So yeah, Danny has also Danny Laferrière. This book is a book of conversations with Danny, and it's called Working in the Bathtub because he likes to work in the bathtub, as do I. And one of the funnest things for me about working on this book was the opportunity to translate Danny, which another one of our writers here tonight, the legendary David Homel, who will be speaking shortly, has also had the great pleasure, as he is Danny Laferrière's main translator.
Yeah.
But in this case, I translated our interviews, and I saw oftentimes, even if the language was simple, the rhythm and the music and the kind of poetic implications meant that there were multiple ways in which it could go. And I really loved that experience of inhabiting those possible implications. And I think that any poetic writer, that's part of the joy of it as well. So I don't want to say much about this book. I want to let this keep chugging along, but maybe I'll just read a little momentary thing about how it began, the interviews began, because I interviewed him a number of times for the Paris Review Writers at Work series, those interviews where writers talk about their process. And I've always loved those interviews so much. And when there was an opportunity to do one of those interviews, well, I met the editor of the Paris Review, and they were saying, we want to be doing stuff with more Montreal writers, and we want to have more of a presence in Montreal. And I said, oh, well, you guys should do something with Danny Laferrière. And it was shortly after he had been inducted to the Académie Française. And I actually saw him for the first time ever at Blue Metropolis. So this is kind of fitting because it was, I think, in 2010, and I was struck by this, you know, charming personality who anybody who's ever seen him read knows what he's like. But yeah, I then did these series of interviews, which ended up being one of these interviews for the Paris Review. But there was so much material, it seemed like maybe we could do a book version of it here for people in Montreal. So and elsewhere, for around the world, the internet, etc. But yeah, I wanted to just read you this bit about how our interviews began. So my first pre-interview with Danny took place in Vermont in July of 2014 on the lawn of Middlebury College's French department, where he was then a writer in residence. And he started by cautioning me that he's notorious for speaking at length. I'm not a reticent Evan S. Cannell figure, he said, because I had a Paris Review issue there at the time with a writer named Evan S. Cannell who'd been interviewed, who didn't want to talk. He had very little to say. And Danny was like, I'm not one of those people. Je me raconte.
Right.
And that turned out to be very true, because we had all these, you know, so many amazing parts of the interviews that a book came out of it. But he also had the ability to speak concisely and in aphorisms. And one of the things that he's written that I love is he says, the point of conversations is to leave no trace. Fortunately, our subsequent conversations were recorded for posterity, and that's what's in here. There we have it.
That's perfect. I was wondering if part of your book was a translation, but it's actually conversation. Well, it is the translated version, maybe, of the conversation that you had.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Because nous avons fait les entrevues en français. Et Danny, il m'a toujours parlé en français. And then I translated them and gave him the opportunity to work with the translations if he wanted. And he made very slight modifications here and there, but generally, by and large, he was pretty chill, laid back, just like he is in his books.
I also love books on creative processes, which is this is kind of my specialty too. And I'm wondering if he talked about his creative process for his first 10 novels, as you know, which are a series, or did he talk about his new projects?
Well, we talked about it all. We talked about childhood. We talked about starting out. We talked about being in Montreal, being in Haiti, being in Miami, the various places he's lived, being in Paris. So yeah, he talked about his process quite a bit. I also had the opportunity to briefly interview his wife, Maggie Berouet, who also spoke a bit about the process.
Yeah.
And, she only did so, she said, because she is friends with Linda Leith. So it was out of out of respect to my mom that she did it. And,
it's the only way.
It.
She would have done it.
Full circle.
Yeah. You have a question apparently, and ask a question.
Okay, so what do we do? Let's see. I click that maybe. Adam, Danny is such an icon. Was that pressure for you to get the book right? I don't think so, because there was so much to work with, and it was also so much of it was so fun and at times emotional and deep and complex. I think that I just had this abundance of material to work with. So it also didn't feel like it needs to be the last word. I mean, his books are all their own enigmatic entities that mutate into, I don't know if you guys know this, but he has started re-editing earlier versions of his books and redoing them. And
rewriting them,
transforming them, and then reissuing them as the same book. So there's one version that is an earlier one, and then there's a subsequent version of the same thing, which he said is a nightmare for academics and translators.
That's right.
So even his books don't get it right. They themselves keep, just rippling out into further versions of themselves. And, this also, there was one interview that was in the Paris Review, and that was one version, and then there was this, and maybe there could be more. But anyways, I'm very happy with how this came out, and very happy to have had a chance to work on it a year ago, right at the beginning, right at this time in the pandemic, when we were all so confused about our daily realities. And anyways, yes. Oh. Should we look and see there's other questions here?
Maybe more questions, yeah.
Why does he like to work in the bathtub? That you're going to have to read the book for the answer to that one. But who doesn't like to work in the bathtub? I think we should let the floor, I don't know how we do this, how we segue into the next people, but I think we should
I have no idea how this works.
We've said it, now they can figure it out.
But I think the interesting point maybe is to figure out how stories allow us to navigate the world. I think that's the common ground between what we did.
I'm going to thank Adam and thank Stéphane for a very interesting conversation and presentations. And it's my job now to welcome Katia Grubisic to the screen. And she's going to be introducing our next segment and the authors that will be coming on there. So please, Katia, you have personally translated 3 out of the books we're presenting this evening, and please take center stage.
Thank you, Linda. And thank you, Adam and Stéphane. And also I'd like to take a moment to thank the puppeteers who are making this all happen. I think sometimes when we're at Blumet in person, en présentiel, we see them running about with cases of wine and books and lighting fixtures and things like this. But I think we've learned this year how much work it is to make virtual events run as well. So I'd like to give a shout out, especially to Leila and to Diana this evening, who are making this all run smoothly for the rest of us who are still after a year going, am I on mute? Am I on mute? So it's my great pleasure. My name is Katia Grubisic, as Linda said, and I've been working with the press on and off for a number of years as an editor occasionally, and more recently as a translator. Last year, I finished a number of books right before the pandemic kind of launched us all into confinement, which was good because then I had more time for anxiety and less time for work. And tonight I'm happy to introduce 3 trois autrices, 3 writers, and 1 translator. I'm the translator of the other 2 books we'll be discussing. And the section of this evening's these readings was entitled "Lives of Girls and Women," as much by the kind of accidental commonalities that make even Blumet's all festival launches and events happen. But in this case, I think it's more meaningful because all 3 of them are works in translation. And I was thinking about this. There's a sense that the writer is the parent of the work. You have to beget the thing and learn it and raise it and send it out into the world. And that there's a great deal of emotion and joy and anxiety that goes along with that. And I think that the translator of a work gets to be, in a sense, the grandmother. It's already created. It's already raised. It already exists. You just get to play with it. You get to enjoy it. You get to love it. And then at the end, you get to give it back send it back from whence it came. And so it's been my pleasure this past year and the past couple of years to work with Ioana Georgescu and Alina Dumitrescu, and also with Stéphane, whose book you just heard from. I'm also introducing this evening Louise Dupré and Louis Hawk, who's her translator. So I'm going to begin by introducing first Louise and Louis. Louis couldn't be with us this evening, but she sent a statement that I'm going to read to you so she can be here even more virtually than we already all are. And then we'll hear also from the new novels that were translated into English, Le Cimetière des Abeilles, as A Cemetery for Bees, and Daughter of Here, La Jetée by Ioana Georgescu. So first I'd like to introduce Louise Dupré, who I think most of you know her. I had read her before I met her, and then I met her and I was just blown away by the woman as I had been by the writer. She's the author of the French version of A Woman of Her Time, and she's published 20 books. She's twice won the Governor General's Award for Poetry. Her dramatic works, her poetry, her fiction have all been translated into English and other languages. She's a member of the Academy of Letters of Quebec and the Royal Society of Canada, and was inducted into the Order of Canada, or sorry, appointed, I think we say. And for her contributions to Quebec literature as a poet, novelist, playwright, essayist, and professor. And she was the author a couple of years ago of L'Album Multicolore. Louis Hawk was her translator for L'Album Multicolore, which was published this past year by Leith Publishing. She's been recognized for her literary work, including by the Canada Council. She's won the John Glasgow Prize and the White Pine Nonfiction Award. She's been nominated 4 times for the GG, and she's published, as well as 3 previous works by Louise. She's also translated works by prominent Dutch and Flemish authors, sorry. And as I say, Louis couldn't be here tonight, but I'd like to read a short statement about her experience working with Louise, and especially about the book, which I heartily recommend to anyone who has a heart or a mother or both. So she writes, "Our mother's death tears us permanently from our roots," writes Louise Dupré. "She can no longer be held responsible for our happiness or despair. From now on, we have to take charge of our own destiny. I sensed this at the cemetery one November afternoon amid the fragrance of chrysanthemums. The previous winter, on an icy December night, the author was alone with her 97-year-old mother, who had just died, in a Quebec City hospital room. She stroked her face. I tell her I love her. It is easier for me than when she was alive. She never liked great emotional outpourings. Slowly, in the course of the following months and years, the author pours out her grief, her remorse, her uncertainties, and strives to capture intact her memory of her mother. In her inimitable style, within passages of lyrical reflection as well as stunningly vivid snapshots, Louise Dupré conjures up her mother's daily existence, its tragedies, its joys, unfolding against the backdrop of Quebec before, during, and after the heady days of the Quiet Revolution. With these small bits of memory, she writes, I strive to reassemble the jigsaw puzzle of a whole, now vanished world. Tantalizing glimpses of grandparents, great-grandparents shatter the stereotypical view we may have of a homogeneous society, while the subtle portrait of a mentally ill relative conveys the deep sadness affecting the entire family circle in the days before modern methods of treatment had been developed. With unflinching honesty, Louise Dupré examines the mother-daughter relationship, casts it in a universal light by quoting authors who have written about their bond with their mother. She meditates on old age, and in the end, takes stock of what her mother has passed on to her. I will think to myself that this woman gave us life, with enough light inside to struggle against the darkness. It's a fine legacy, as is this compelling narrative. J'aimerais vous présenter, c'est mon grand plaisir de vous présenter Louise Dupré, qui va nous lire, je crois, un extrait du roman, l'album multicolore en traduction.
Thank you very much, Katia. So, first I want to say that it is a joy to be published by Leith Publishing. The book is very beautiful. Thank you to Leith, Leila, Marshy, and all the team. Thank you also to Lidway Hawk for a great translation. I will read the beginning of the book. I look at my mother in her bed. She is white as the sheet. She has just died. I don't believe it. The nurse beside me doesn't either. Only an hour ago, he told me about a protocol to be followed soon during the stage of respiratory distress. Distress. The word hit me like a punch. She may have heard while she slept. She may have decided to leave us before. I am relieved. That is how I feel while I look at my mother, her face peaceful now, still warm, as though she were lost in a happy dream. In the evening, pain pounced on her like an animal. It began to devour her insides. I asked the nurse to call the doctor. He agreed to increase the dose of morphine. One doesn't let a 97-year-old woman die in agony. She finally dozed off. Standing at her bedside, I wept for her. I wept over the billions of living beings, humans of all races, animals of all species who have died since the beginning of time after much suffering. Who is this God who is supposed to be infinitely good and kind? I stroked my mother's face. We should tie to someone who have just died, I have heard. Consciousness isn't like the art, which stops all at once. It slowly fades. I don't know if there is any foundation to this belief, but I talk to my mother. I tell her I love her. It's easier for me than when she was alive. She never liked great emotional outpourings. Except these past few weeks, She couldn't control her feelings as well. She smiled when I hugged her. She let herself be tucked in at night at bedtime. I am waiting for my brothers. They shouldn't be long. I woke them up a few minutes ago. I didn't need to explain. The ringing of the telephone was enough. The nurse asked me if he could rearrange my mother in the bed. No, no staging. She should remain just as she is. My brothers should see her as I saw her. He leaves, and the room is silent again. I can finally think about my mother, think about her death. For a long time, I imagined a theatrical scenario. She looks at me, I hold her hand, and she is fully conscious when she takes her last breath. I would never have thought that could be so ordinary. You get the morphine injections and you fall asleep as after a hard day. Thank you.
Merci, Louise. Je me souviens que j'avais entendu à un moment donné que l'événement pour lequel on a plus besoin de sa mère, c'est le décès de sa mère. Et à ce moment-là, elle n'est plus là, elle n'y est plus pour nous réconforter. Et c'est un livre, quand j'ai lu l'album multicolore, c'était tellement évident que la présence, elle brillait par son absence, quoi. C'est ça qui manquait. Donc, félicitations pour le livre, and congratulations to you and to Louis for the translation. Bravo. Un livre absolument à lire en français et en anglais. J'aimerais maintenant vous présenter Alina Dumitrescu. Alina emigrated to Montreal from Romania right before the fall of Ceausescu, and within a couple of years had begun publishing in French. Le Cimetière des Abeilles was her first novel, published by Triptyque in 2016, and in English a few weeks ago by Linda Leith Publishing. With my little post-it note. The original French version was a finalist at the Festival du Roman de Chambéry, and it won the Blumette Conseil des Arts de Montréal Diversity Prize the year it came out. And that was where I actually first met Alina. I've been president of the literature committee on the CAM for a few years, and they asked me to interview her for the prize ceremony. And we chatted a few times on the phone prior to the actual live interview, and that was recorded and everything was part of the event. And it's so rare that you hit it off so well with one person. We talked very little about the book because we spent so much time just chatting and laughing and discovering each other and taking great pleasure in that. And that day I approached her about translating the book, and when I pitched it to Linda, she agreed. And I'm so glad to have been able to help bring this book into being in English. Et c'est mon très grand plaisir de vous présenter Alina Dumitrescu.
Bonsoir, on est très loin ici de bonjour, hi, et j'en suis ravie. Je ne pourrais pas être plus heureuse que d'avoir le livre traduit et par la même occasion avoir rencontré l'équipe de Linda Leith et tant d'autres personnes qui sont vraiment une inspiration. Je ne passerai pas plus loin sans exprimer ma gratitude à l'équipe de Linda Leith, puisque je sais que ça a l'air très chic et très extraordinaire, la vue d'un éditeur, mais l'éditeur prend tous les risques. Et je suis vraiment choyée d'avoir eu mon livre transfiguré de Le Cimetière des Abeilles à A Cemetery for Bees. L'expérience de accompagnatrice à la traduction a été absolument extraordinaire. C'est pour ça que je parle d'une transfiguration et non pas seulement d'une traduction. Tant de découvertes, oui, je lisais un peu en anglais, mais rien à voir avec les miracles produits par notre Dame Katia, qui a même fait des mots sur mesure. ma préoccupation était vraiment, bon, mis à part l'honneur d'avoir le livre traduit en anglais, ma préoccupation et curiosité très grande était de comment le langage si poétique de cimetière des abeilles et qui est très dépendant du génie de la langue française, c'est une ode à la langue française, comment le rythme, la musique, la poésie, l'atmosphère pouvant être retrouvés dans une traduction. Donc, je ne peux être qu'enchantée. Je l'ai lu 3 fois déjà et je trouve que c'est une expérience extraordinaire pour moi. Je vous invite à le lire. Le titre A Cemetery for Bees n'a rien de morbide ou de triste. C'est une métaphore pour l'enfance et je vous laisserai découvrir ça. Donc, je me permets de... s'il y a des questions pour quelqu'un, je ne sais pas si on... Avant de la transition, avant la lecture, ah non. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions? Non. Ok, on y va.
Tu peux y aller et lire, et puis s'il y a des questions, on pourra les prendre pour vous 3 à la fin, si vous voulez. Entre-temps, je vais aussi jeter un coup d'œil pour voir s'il y en a qui surviennent, donc on pourra voir aussi à la fin s'il y en a.
Magnifique, magnifique. Avec Katia, on a choisi un petit fragment, juste pour vous mettre en appétit. Et je lis une page en français et je vous laisserai écouter Katia ensuite. Coupée en amont et en aval de ma langue d'origine, la langue maternelle rétrécit jusqu'à devenir uniquement la langue de la mère. Ma mère ne peut prononcer ni les U, ni les AN, ni les E.
And of course, what would a virtual event be without a connection problem? Leila and Deanna will maybe let you try to see if we can get Alina back. And in the meantime, we'll perhaps hear the French version if we have time when she comes back. But I'll step in English. So this is a section at which the protagonist has landed in Montreal fairly recently and has spent her life learning French, France, and has this love affair with France. And it's presented all of a sudden with Quebec and with the separation, the fairly brutal separation, as anyone who has immigrated will know, from her native land and her native language and her family and so forth. So these are her musings at that moment. I'm cut off from my native language upstream and down. My mother tongue shrinks until it becomes just my mother's tongue. Oh, revoilà Alina. Eh bien, je viens de lire le même paragraphe que tu viens de lire, donc on va faire ça de façon plus civilisée, mais vas-y si tu veux reprendre.
Civilisée, pourquoi faire? Oui, il me restait très peu d'ailleurs. Donc, je suis la seule personne à leur parler roumain. Le plus souvent, nous parlons en français. Entre eux, mes fils parlent français, oui, mais aussi film, informatique et secret. Tant d'autres langages qui me sont inaccessibles. De ma mère, je suis orpheline linguistique. De mes enfants, endeuillés.
Merci. So I'll step in then. My mother tongue shrinks until it becomes just my mother's tongue. My mother, who cannot pronounce the letters U, N, or E in French. As a child, I withdrew into my head to escape her. Now I take refuge in French. I turn away. I turn a deaf ear by writing in a language she can't read or understand. Linguistic revenge. And a second involuntary revenge. My children can't read Romanian. They understand only a few words. Romanian is their mother's language. I'm the only person who speaks Romanian to them, and most of the time we talk to each other in French. My sons speak French to each other, and also the language of movies, computers, secrets. So many languages that are inaccessible to me. Between my mother and my children, I am lost. In one direction, a linguistic orphan, and in the other, bereaved. Donc, allez jeter un coup d'œil à Cemetery for Bees. C'est au cimetière des abeilles si vous lisez en français. Je reprends mon chapeau d'animatrice before donning once again the translator's hat. And it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Ioana Georgescu. La Jetée came across my desk a couple of years ago at the sort of worst possible time pre-pandemic when Worth had a different context. I had a teaching contract and a young baby, and I got to know Ioana mostly through her work, through her book, and then in Fits and Starts, I got to know her as well. She's the author of 3 novels, as well as being a performance artist. She's done video installations, photography, painting, and drawing, and she's been an international artist in a sense. And her work, especially in La Jetée, I feel, it really conveys that sense of traveling the world, both in a sort of dreamscape and physically. It's a bit of a travelogue and a mental travelogue, an oniric travelogue. La Jetée, Elle s'appellera Mot, so was published in English last year by Linda Leith Publishing as Daughter of Here. Georgescu holds a PhD in comparative literature, and she's taught in the Italian and English departments at McGill University. She's truly a Renaissance woman. And it was my great pleasure to be able to translate this book, to discover her and to discover the many, many multi-layered worlds of the novel. Donc, Ioana, do you want to, I'll let you say a few words and I'll read the section that we agreed upon if you'd like. Je te passe le micro.
Or if you're too tired, I could read it as you wish.
if you, I mean, I'm sure people are tired of hearing me, so if you want to read it.
Yeah. I'm tired about the techniques here, but maybe I'll try. No, it was really thrilling to work with you, and I'm really happy how this book came out as almost a collaboration now, and which also involves Linda and Leila and Jennifer and Debbie. It's like a teamwork of women who use their brains, their hands, their eyes, their maybe their sex. Anyways, something beautiful came out. And when we talked about what you or I were going to read, you chose an excerpt. And so if you're too tired, I could read it, or if you'd like to read it, you could read it as you wish.
Je te cède la parole if you don't mind. Go ahead.
No,
I'd love to hear you.
I thought you told me, yeah, okay. So I'll try. But I'm really troubled by the reading of Louise Dupré. I don't know if I'm going to burst into tears. I was trying to keep my emotions on screen, but it was really such a strong image that many of us relate to. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to read after that. So the chapter I'm going to read from that you chose and I was agreeing with is called "This is Where I Come From," and it's coming. The title of the chapter comes from a phrase in La Jetée when they're in front of the sequoia tree and they look at the tree and he says, "I come from here, but it's outside the circles of the tree." So I used that image to write the chapter, and so the text you chose was mostly about the picture that was inspired by this really beautiful photo that my father took of me in Mangalia, in maybe Alina knows the place, and but it's the story of the book is not my story. I just sometimes use visual stimuli or odors or images or stories from my family, but this is not my family, which is here. So my mother had handed me a box. "When you're older," she told me. She kept her word. She left me the picture of Habib, my father. I looked from him from Asmara to Massawa and all the way to Cairo. My mother left me with a freeze frame, but in a fit of anger, I destroyed the picture and threw it into the Nile. The guide on my journey to my origins was a lone photo of him, washed out and wrinkled. The image of my father stays in my head. He is forever young, the stranger I call the man from Asmara. I will leave you a photograph too, the picture with the white dress. A little girl stands on a jetty on the Black Sea. She's wearing a white dress, the same dress she'll be wearing soon at the Domenico Modugno concert in Bucharest. She's against the middle of the wall, her back to the camera, half in profile. Her skin is darker than usual. The summer has been unusually sunny. Her frizzy hair is cut short and is dry from the salt and the sun. It's her last summer in Romania. Who knows what's going through her head? What she doesn't know is that soon she will find herself on a night train barreling through the endless tunnels. She's walking towards the lighthouse at the end of the jetty, her mind elsewhere. The fishermen haven't arrived yet with their reels and their bamboo rods. To the left, the child's shadow stretches long, but not to photographers who stays a good distance away. Was it Leonard who took the photo? Mo, one day I will show you the jetty in person. I'll take a picture of you at the same place on the white line that splits the gray cement. You can tuck it away in your pink silk-covered photo album. That's it.
Merci, Ioana, et merci de t'être partagé avec nous, d'avoir partagé ces histoires
so
avec nous.
Emotional right now that I know that I didn't do a good reading, but I'm still thinking of the first images of Louise, and I just can't take them out of my head. So I'm sorry if I didn't read the way I would.
Pas du tout. Pas du tout. You've whetted our appetite. I think all three of you have. So thank you very much to all three of you. There are a couple of questions that I can present to us. The first one is from Colleen. It's for any of the three of you. So I can I'll read it in English first and I'll translate it. She asks, all your books seem so rich with character and place and are very internal. Do you ever feel that this is a more female way of writing or seeing the world? Donc la question porte sur si la présence et la richesse de personnages dans les livres et le dialogue interne donc qui domine est une façon plus féminine de voir le monde ou non, et quelle est votre expérience aux trois?
I can't say, I can talk. I can.
Oui, vas-y, bien sûr, allez-y.
I can tell you, maybe, yes, I think that the sensibility is very important for me, and I think it is for Elena and for Ioana also. I like to describe characters, and I like that the readers can imagine the characters, you know, and can love the characters. So it is what I can say. Maybe Alina and Ioana will tell other things, will add something.
Alina, yeah.
Moi, j'ai une vraie allergie.
Like this, we used to do it.
Like this, in Romania. Moi, j'ai un grand problème avec ce genre d'interprétation, c'est-à-dire que j'ai tant de fois vu depuis mon adolescence, j'ai une allergie à vous savez, une narration toute féminine et un monde tout féminin. Moi, je trouve que il y a des auteurs hommes aussi qui peuvent vibrer, mais je suis une humaniste, pas une féministe. Donc, moi, j'ai un problème avec cette interprétation-là, puisque on peut faire de la même manière où des acteurs font des rôles d'interprétation. On peut très bien attribuer à des personnages masculins, féminins et autres notre sensibilité, mais peut-être qu'on est près du cœur et du créateur et de, je sais pas, on vibre. À vous.
Non, c'est peut-être qu'on vibre comme artiste, c'est tout. Je ne sais pas si on vibre plus qu'un autre, mais on vibre à notre façon. So I don't really. It's a difficult question to ask to answer because it would need a lot of statistics and comparisons and I don't know. We try to be ourselves and true to ourselves and tell whatever is within our being, but I don't know if it's really, I don't know. What do you think, Louise?
I can tell it in French.
Yeah.
Some years ago, I won on a jury, a literary jury, and it was a jury with pseudonyms, you know. And after the jury, we decided to tell, if there were women or a man who wrote the books. And all the members of the jury told the right answers. Okay. This novel, a man. This novel, a woman. And we were right.
Okay. So there is a truth.
So I agree with Alina, you know, we don't have statistics on this question, and women can be violent too. But in general, women novels and men novels are different because this is not there are not the same things that interest men and women. I'm sorry, but I tell you what I think. But I like men's book too. And I read men's book too. But in general, I think that it's different.
I think it's hard to tell. Tiresias perhaps has the answers, or perhaps Ovid reading his mind. But it's a difficult question to answer because it is individual, and most people, I guess, few people have written as multiple sexes or as multiple genders. There's another question before we move on to the next segment, if I may. So from Andrew. Andrew demande d'Alina, je me demande si la traduction de votre livre a donné de nouveaux sens ou encore une nouvelle vie aux mots qui étaient inattendus. Alors Alina, je te passe la parole.
Oui, déjà dans la version française, dans la version française, j'ai glissé des petites choses, intertextualité, pour que le lecteur fasse son travail, et j'ai juste mis le lecteur sur la piste. D'ailleurs, mon conjoint m'appelle quelquefois Ellipsina, puisqu'il trouve que je n'ouvre pas suffisamment, je ne détaille pas les choses, mais je crois qu'on a quelquefois la tendance d'écrire des choses de la manière dont on aimerait lire. Donc, des choses suggérées, qu'il y ait un travail de la part du lecteur. Oui, du point de vue de la traduction, j'ai été très étonnée et là, je sentais vraiment mes limites à moi, puisque oui, j'ai lu des auteurs de langue anglaise, mais le plus souvent en roumain et quelquefois en français. J'ai osé timidement en anglais, mais maintenant, je me suis mise de plus en plus à lire en anglais directement. Et il est vrai que je ne savais pas à quoi vibre le lecteur anglais, de langue anglaise. Quels sont par exemple, le génie de la langue anglaise avec les références et tout ça. Et ça, c'était le travail extraordinaire de Katia. Entre autres, je suis obsédée par la beauté de quelques vers. Il y a quelques illustrations dans mon livre qui ont été, quelques dessins qui ont été faits par Edwin Stănculescu, qui est mon fils aîné et qui est l'enfant dans le livre qu'on vous présente. Et à un moment donné, il y a, voilà, il y a d'ailleurs ici des dessins à l'arrière de moi et dans le livre. Et il y avait deux illustrations. Et Katia, après discussion, a choisi de les titrer The Still Point of the Turning World. C'est d'une telle beauté, je les contemple comme mots. Donc pour moi, j'ai même rêvé en anglais. C'est terrible ce qui m'arrive. J'aimerais même écrire en anglais. Et je ne sais pas si ça répond à la... Donc ça donne d'autres sens, c'est ça, c'est le tourne-monde en français. Et là, les références trouvées par Katia et d'autres choses qui sont vraiment, ça amène les choses ailleurs et les rend compréhensibles et conviviales pour le lecteur de langue anglaise. Je crois que j'ai à peu près répondu.
The beauty, of course, in that case belongs to T.S. Eliot and not at all to me, but it seemed like a fitting place to land. Donc, s'il n'y a pas d'autres questions pour notre session, c'est qu'on veut quand même fêter avec d'autres auteurs et autrices ce soir. Et donc, je vais vous souhaiter à tous et à toutes une bonne soirée. Et normalement, on devrait être en présentiel l'année prochaine, mais si on doit être en absentiel encore une fois, il y a pire. J'ai hâte de vous faire la bise. Cheers. Thank you, Linda.
Merci.
Thank you, Leila. Thank you, Diana. Bonne soirée. Merci beaucoup à Louise, à Ioana et à Nina. And Leila, back to the studio.
Félicitations à tout le monde.
Félicitations aussi à toutes les trois.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
À bientôt.
À bientôt, j'espère.
Am I on the screen alone? Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Leila Marshy. I'm the associate producer with Linda Leith. I'm live, right? Ugh, this is so discombobulating. So, okay, thank you. Oh, yes, Eric, thank you. Okay, so I am, when we were planning this night, we decided to, hi, Fanie and Eric. No, Raquel, I was thinking, Fanie, you look so different. So we divided our books into theme. And this theme is Quebec, Amérique. The theme prior, Lives of Girls and Women, Quebec, Amérique. Linda will come back with body language. So in this theme, we have 3 books. Who Belongs in Quebec? Identity Politics in a Changing Society, Raquel Fletcher. Communication et violence, des récits personnels à l'hégémonie américaine by Eric Deguire. The 2 of them, both young writers, both of them, it's their first book. So we're very happy to have these books, and we're very happy to bring these 2 extremely intelligent people to the publishing world. This will be followed by KEROUAC and PRESLEY. This is a translation of André Pronovost's novel, memoir. So what I wanted to talk about is the reason why we thought these had possibly something in common is Quebec and the United States has always had a shared history, a shared past. There's a lot of overlap. Certainly Jack Kerouac, the generations of Quebecers who went down to New Hampshire, Rhode Island, to work in the mills. And so Raquel Fletcher, to go to the first author, is the Quebec Assemblée Nationale reporter for Global News. I'm going to put this here so I don't have to look over that. She's born and raised and educated in Regina, Saskatchewan, and she's a proud Francophile, which is why she's here. And you can catch her any day when Legault has his press conferences, and you can hear her voice asking probably the best questions. She's the author of Who Belongs in Quebec. She takes a long, hard look at what it means to be a Quebecer, whether or not we wear a hijab or trace our origins from outside the province. This is something that Quebecers of all stripes have been dealing with for forever. Who is a Quebecer? And sometimes I believe it takes somebody from outside to be able to ask that question and to be able to find a better avenue to the answer. Somebody needs to turn their mic off. Thank you. Okay. De sa part, le Libanais québécois Éric Deguire a été toujours fasciné par la culture américaine, ou plutôt son impact sur la culture et la vie ici. L'auteur de Communication et violence, des récits personnels à l'hégémonie américaine, cherche à communiquer des idées et à créer de nouvelles réflexions au sujet de l'américanité. Là, ce soir, il va parler en anglais et il va lire en français. That's great. KEROUAC and PRESLEY by André Pronovost. He's a musician, a wanderer, author of 7 books. This is the first one that's been translated into English. And here, it's really interesting. The starting point is a murder that took place in the southwest of Montreal in 1975. And he follows the Appalachian Trail and the ghost of this murder and just makes an incredible number of connections and just tangents, connecting singers, writers, the history of Quebec with the history and the roots of the USA. He can't be with us tonight, so we're going to hear from Fred Reed, who translated the book, who is a pretty big translator, multiple winner of the Governor General's Award. And he has a video for us from Morocco, where Fred lives. So we'll go to that video last. But right now, we'll open the floor to Eric and Raquel. And I think I said Rachel earlier, didn't I? Eric and Raquel did. And Raquel, maybe you can start and maybe talk a bit about what led you to Quebec and what led you to this book specifically, and the questions that you probe quite methodically and with a scalpel.
Yeah, well, sure. I'm the one with the loud microphone, I think, because my dog is having a feast in the background. She's having her own wine and cheese back there, the joys of virtual being at home. So hopefully she'll calm down in a few minutes here. I'm really excited, though, to be in the same panel with Eric. For those of you who don't know, I actually work with Eric's fiance, or are you married now?
Not because of the pandemic. Well,
okay, so yeah. So Kalina was talking about her fiance. She never mentioned his name. She was always talking about my fiance's book that's coming out. And then finally we put 2 and 2 together. And so if you look closely, if you see me, because I'm the reporter on Global News, I do lives. I've been working from home for the last few weeks. So if you ever catch my live, you'll see on my bookshelf, right behind my shoulder is Eric's book. So you'll have to pay closer attention next time. So this book is sort of a long time project that I have been working on ever since I moved to Quebec City in 2016. And a few things happened since I moved here. So first thing, Donald Trump got elected to office, and as Leila mentioned, there's a lot of connection between Quebec and the US, and particularly New York, because New York is so close, and that's where obviously Donald Trump is from. But there was a lot of, when I started working as a political correspondent, there was a lot of crossover, politically speaking, between, okay, what does this new administration mean for not just politics in the US, obviously, but Canadian politics, and how is that influencing Quebec politics? And at the time, our current premier, who was in the opposition, was often called the Donald Trump of Quebec, and there were a lot of connections made. And then in 2017, there was the mosque shooting, and this was devastating for a lot of people, but also devastating for the reporters who covered this. And as a young reporter like me, I had never covered any kind of like mass tragedy. I was coming to Quebec City thinking that I would be in the safest city in Canada, that I would be, you know, I would make my big break covering when the Nordiques came back. I was covering politics. I was not expecting to cover anything like that. And so this really shook up the province, obviously, and also then fostered this discussion and this public debate about racism in the province, who is accepted, who is experiencing discrimination and experiencing violence, and are we paying enough attention? Are we doing enough collectively as a society to address that? So I don't want to waste too much time before, I don't want to eat into Eric's time, but I'm going to read from the first chapter. So this is, there we go. This is my book. And I'm going to read from the very first chapter. Basically, I cover between the time that I moved here in 2016, just until after a historic, actually provincial election in Quebec that saw the CAQ elected to power. And each chapter is a different aspect of the political climate during that time, but I also included a lot of personal essays, as Leila mentioned, as sort of like the outsider who had just come here and is trying to grapple with this issue, but trying to grapple with it the same way that all Quebecers are grappling with it. So this is from chapter 1. The bar was packed and everyone was in good spirits when I arrived at Enoch's, a small pub full of flat-screen TVs on Quebec City's Grande Allée, for an exclusive 2016 U.S. presidential election viewing party for members of the Press Tribune, as well as politicians and their staff from the National Assembly. I had been to Enoch's once before for a beer and knew about their delicious European hot dogs. I ordered one immediately. The place was fast filling up. Members of the various Quebec political parties and journalists rarely agreed on anything, except when it came to who should be the next president of the United States. But this was an unusually cohesive group, united in its jubilance as the first results came in. We were impatient to put the past 2 years of nearly incomprehensible campaign madness behind us, and we knew we were about to bear witness to history as the first woman made it to the Oval Office. There were 2 large cardboard cutouts of the candidates at the entrance to the bar. A colleague and I posed, smiling on either side of a beaming Hillary Clinton, whom we were sure would become the first woman president. Canadians in general almost overwhelmingly supported Clinton for president. An Ipsos poll conducted on behalf of Global News on November 6, 2016, found that 76% of Canadians thought Clinton was the best choice for the United States, and 82% thought she would be better for Canada. A Main Street poll found that 68% of Canadians say they would have voted for Clinton, and 17% for Trump. We would indeed witness history, but it wasn't at all what we expected. By midnight, the once jovial party had turned somber. No one spoke. We barely moved, not even to refill our drinks. We downed them quietly and then stared for a long time into the bottom of our glasses before putting them back on the table. The bar that had been packed was now less than half full. I could feel a ball of anxiety in the pit of my stomach. My colleagues had all the same incredulous expression on their faces. There was still time for the results to turn around, but somehow we knew that wasn't going to happen. Should we go? I asked. They nodded. Once outside, I could feel a heaviness on my chest. Why was I so affected by the results of another country's presidential election? Any political journalist anywhere could have told you that night in November was the beginning of drastic change. That Christmas, in my annual letter to friends and family, I wrote, I have a lot of apprehension for 2017. There is constant concern that the words we write and the words we say could incite violence. Although I'm worried about this, right now is also one of the most exciting and important times to be a journalist, and I feel like I'm in the best position to make a difference. When I wrote that, I had no way of knowing that a gunman would walk into a mosque only a month later with an assault rifle and a 9mm handgun, open firing during evening prayers. We later learned that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's reaction to Trump's Muslim travel ban had in part pushed the shooter over the edge. Was Trump's presidency emboldening bigots and racists? What sinister undercurrent was taking hold of the political and social climate south and now north of the border? Over to you, Eric.
Yeah, that's you. I did. I don't know if you picked that excerpt with me in mind. I have my copy. Congratulations for this for your publication. And 1 year later, well, we finally we come here to celebrate. And yeah, interesting excerpt on that election, which we could we'll devote another 2-hour panel to rehash the 2016 election and how we all saw those results come in, and it's true, the consensus, and it was the same thing this year with Joe Biden in Canada, north of the border. I think it was I remember seeing a QC 125 poll saying that it was 90% of supporters of every political party and even 60% of conservative voters in Canada who preferred Joe Biden. And there was an anti-Trump sentiment that was quite clear this side of the border. And then when, obviously, tragically, mass shootings are something we associate with the U.S. and sometimes, rare occasions, they happen north of the border. And you covered and went through that and dove into that event with interesting depth. So congratulations for that. I would ask you one question before I go ahead with my work. You were talking about how you were interested in, from your work, interested in what was going on in Quebec City and Quebec politics, and Legault in 2016, who was who was the second opposition. No one thought he would necessarily become the next premier, and who was maybe in certain circles referred to as exploiting certain Trump sentiments, maybe on immigration. And we remember that it was only in May of 2016 that Pierre-Carl Pelado never got his shot. It was May 2nd, I believe, 2016, and he resigned from the leadership of the PQ. And maybe for a split second there, well, with his financial background and a hint of populism, maybe he was the Donald Trump of Quebec as well. But how you were saying how Donald Trump being from New York and the northeast of the U.S. being so close to us here in Quebec, and you being from Saskatchewan, and how René Lévesque once said in his independence, in his quest for independence, that Quebec was ultimately more of was more part of the north-south paradigm than an east-west paradigm, and that Quebec made more sense as part of a whole with New York, with Massachusetts, or then with the rest of Canada on this axis. And I don't know what you would have to say about that.
I wanted to mention too, that Jean-François Lisée, who ended up replacing Pierre-Carl Pelado when he stepped down, was also referred to as the Donald Trump of Quebec at one point for comments he made about building a wall between us and on Roxham Road.
Yes, yeah, I remember absolutely.
And joking that he wanted to build a fence, not a wall. Joking that he was going to. He was serious about building the fence, and then joking that he was going to get Mexico to pay for it. And a lot of people thought that was very displaced as a comment. But I agree with you that there seems to be definitely I don't know if it replaces that east-west relationship or division, but there definitely is a north-south relationship that is, I think, less talked about. But that definitely seemed to be very powerful during that election, and still now, even during the Biden election, like between Biden and Trump during the 2020 election.
Yeah, for sure. I'll I guess go ahead with the little bit that I planned. I think it's nice to continue because we both kind of play on that. Remember when I got the amazing news in May of 2019 that Linda Leith wanted to publish my book. And I remember telling a friend, the whole Anglo-Franco thing, I think that's we're the right fit for that. And I think that's kind of what brought me to write my book. So here, Communication et Violence, des récits personnels à l'hégémonie américaine. I think ultimately to exploit two things that I always wanted to deal with as a writer and as a person, which is the whole Anglo-Franco balance that I'm always trying to work out in my personal life, my social life, and my professional life. And obviously with all the culture we consume around us. And the whole multicultural aspect as well, what with my mom being a Lebanese immigrant, but whose mother's Greek, so it gets even more complicated. And then to deal with the whole aspect of American culture. And to me, well, you want to talk about American culture, and I'll tell you all the TV shows that I like and all the baseball games that I went to. And then I started wondering in 2017, 2018, 2019, in the days of the Trump administration, that although the US has always had so many successes and so many failures, you couldn't write a book about American power and American culture in the era of the Trump administration and just talk about, I like watching this TV show and I like going to baseball games. It seemed that we were maybe missing a little something, which brings us to 2020 when our books came out and the world was ending for the first time at least. And we really didn't know what was going on, especially in March and April of 2020. And how many wondered if this was the ultimate decline of the US. And then here we are a year later after they were a total failure at the first part of the pandemic, seemingly ahead of the game in this one. Now, this isn't a redemption in any way. It just shows that the U.S. continuously and that America continuously succeeds and fails at many things at once, and succeeds greatly and fails greatly at many things at once. So I did prepare une brève lecture of my own from that covers some of these things and how we deal with someone who I said with the initial sentiment was, let me write these personal essays about how I grew up watching Seinfeld and going to baseball games. And it didn't seem like it was enough about American culture, and that I had to deal with how many of the things in American culture are shameful. And dealing with that personally, and then coming to a bit more of a essayistic or social science type analysis of it all. I'll go ahead with my brief reading. Les communications, les échanges et le mouvement qui sont au cœur de l'univers sont aussi au cœur de l'américanité. Cela nous rappelle le potentiel aussi remarquable qu'éphémère de cette culture et de cet ethos. L'américanité est faite d'un échange d'idées aussi bien noble que regrettable et devient donc malgré tout un modèle pour réfléchir à de nombreuses questions qui affligent et colorent l'humanité. Un modèle qui m'amène à affronter l'un de mes plus grands conflits intérieurs. Il me faudra un jour inévitablement haïr ce que j'ai toujours admiré. Qu'il soit question de Thomas Jefferson et du fait qu'il fut propriétaire de plus de 600 esclaves. Des pratiques génocidaires envers les Autochtones sur lesquelles ce pays a été bâti, ou bien des tendances racistes, sexistes ou homophobes d'un auteur qu'on a admiré ou d'une télésérie qu'on a adorée. Les valeurs qui ont forgé l'américanité se trouvent remises en question et nous devons considérer le rapport que nous entretenons avec l'histoire et les expériences culturelles qui nous ont marqués. Quand les idées et le mode de vie américain passent les frontières et s'expriment de manière aussi évidente que subtile partout dans le monde, nous pouvons parler du résultat de cette influence comme étant l'américanité. Il s'agit d'un phénomène en mouvement constant, d'un mouvement aussi physique que virtuel, si abstrait, mais également si palpable dans toutes ses contradictions. Des crises de santé publique aux avancées phénoménales en médecine. Des succès entrepreneuriaux au fil des décennies de General Motors et Google aux capitalistes sauvages à Wall Street, creusant les inégalités économiques avec le soutien de Washington. 17 des 20 meilleures universités au monde sont situées aux États-Unis et les citoyens américains pensent encore que la Terre a été créée en 6 jours il y a 6000 ans. Je pourrais dire que la réflexion que j'entame ici sur l'hégémonie américaine ne donnera ni lettre d'amour ni critique viscérale de l'américanité. Mais plutôt que d'ignorer ces deux missions au nom d'une utopique vision équilibrée, je vais tenter de les remplir toutes les deux au nom d'un regard subjectif, certes, mais qui maintiendra toujours un vœu d'honnêteté. Very sweet. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, there is this sort of weird, or I shouldn't say weird, I shouldn't categorize it like that, but there is this dichotomy between, you know, if you even read the book that our premier wrote, François Legault, he talks about Silicon Valley and even creating a similar kind of research innovation space between Quebec City and Montreal here, and he compares it to the success of Silicon Valley. And then on the other hand, you have Quebecers who are very, very critical of some of the policies in the U.S. So there's like this love-hate relationship between Quebecers and the U.S. Do you, like, that's one of the questions that I wanted to ask you when I read the book.
It's and I think people embrace it, and I think it's even more intense elsewhere in the world because Quebecers, we haven't been stigmatized through economic policies or invasions in the way people elsewhere on the globe have been in the past few decades, where the anti-American sentiment is that much stronger and that much more justified, and who still will do the movie thing, do the Google thing, do the McDonald's thing, and do the music thing, do the Netflix thing, and the iPhone thing, and celebrate it. And there's kind of, it's not supposed to be a contradiction somehow. It's supposed to make sense. It does make sense. Obviously it says something about American soft power, that they don't have to invade countries to kind of control them anymore. But also you're not gaining a lot of ground or gaining people's hearts when the anti-American sentiment in many countries in the world is very strong and for absolutely justifiable reasons, and you can't buy them off with an iPhone or by installing McDonald's restaurants. So if you're gonna continue to maintain some type of structural international inequality. So I think Quebec is kind of in this sweet spot where we're not really stigmatized by Americans. Okay, maybe they'll make fun of Mitt Romney for being able to speak French, but that's pretty soft. Otherwise, we're in a pretty good zone, and Americans like to travel here and vice versa. So ultimately, we do criticize from time to time, and just because we're not explicitly victims of bad policies that come out of the U.S. doesn't mean we can't criticize them either. And then we do get all the positive takeaways that come with that. So we're in a decent position compared to other people in the world, for sure.
There's Justement, there's a question here. How many Canadians think we have a better country? And do you think we have a better country compared to the States?
Yes, we do. Sure. I was short answer.
I mean, it's a funny question, but at the same time, I mean, we are, I mean, to the South, there's the mantra, you know, leaders of the free world, the best country in the world. But I think Canadians harbor a secret belief that we are the best country.
Yeah, well, there was a book, or I think I read the article in the New Yorker. It was called "We Could Have Been Canada," and it was about the idea that the U.S. went through this bloody revolution that is celebrated, and we were discussing, we periodically discuss the royalty in Canada as well. And the U.S. went through all of this, but for what? To have people behind Canada in terms of healthcare, in terms of the poverty rate, in terms of education, in terms of all this, and it's saying that the U.S. could have been Canada to a certain extent.
It's interesting too, because I believe it was Freakonomics did a episode on social mobility. You know, the American dream. The American dream is that you come here and you work really hard and you should be able to move up socially and to make your dreams come true, right? And it statistically, you'd have a better chance your chances of social mobility, your chances of accomplishing the American dream are better off in Canada than in the US. But does that make us a better country? I don't know. We have to. I'm skeptical of comparing it that way. That we're better, because I don't.
Yeah, because then we get
what
into
is better?
You know, we had slavery too, and then everyone's like, "Well, that's the Americans' problem." Well, it's ours too, you know.
I have a question here for Raquel. Do you think the CAQ's unpopular pandemic response has reduced their Islamophobic influence on Quebec? From Sanya. And she has a corollary. Also, do you think that comparing bigoted Quebec politicians to Trump erases their homegrown roots?
So they're both very interesting questions. The one thing that I would say is that during the first wave of the pandemic, for sure, Legault was very popular. And so talking about his impopularity is in relationship to his overwhelming popularity during the first wave. And he still remains more popular than a lot of other premiers during the pandemic. So I don't know, and it's not like we've stopped talking about Islamophobia or racism. I would say since the pandemic, we've even been talking about these issues even more, because we've seen movements like the Black Lives Matter, and we've seen Joyce Echaquan and Joyce's principal come out. So that was a woman who died in a hospital in Joliette, and she was a First Nations woman, and she filmed herself being mistreated by health staff, and they were uttering horrible racist slurs at her just before she died. So, and then we saw a reaction to that, whereas the premier named for the first time in Quebec history an anti-racism minister. Now, whether or not that will lead to concrete change.
Wasn't it a white person? It was a white man, right? Yeah.
It was a white man. A tiny step. I don't know. I don't know if you can judge him for that. I mean, I think that white people of color, all have the same responsibility to fight racism, and white people probably more. But we've seen, one of the first things that he did when he came to the National Assembly after first being named was to kind of downplay some of the accusations that were going on about saying, well, is this really racism? We have to be careful when we use that term. We need to see. So I think that they're sincere in their desire to want to rid the province of racism, but it's not just like we can't just cast a wand and okay, poof, racism is gone. So I don't know. And what was the second part of that question?
Let's see. Do you think comparing Quebec politicians to Trump erases their homegrown roots? If you could answer that quickly, actually, Raquel, because we're going to move on to the next segment soon, and
I don't know if I could answer that quickly.
Right. It's a bit of everything.
Yeah, it is. I think. Okay, I'll try to be quick. I think that by comparing them to Donald Trump, there is some truth to that. That it was like, oh, this is being imported from the U.S. So this is, an American thing that's happening, or an American trend. Whereas I think, in certain cases, then that de-responsibilizes. Then that's a French word. That's not English, but it makes them less responsible for maybe their own prejudice. And I think that. Like in saying, oh, Canada is a better country than the U.S., I think we all need to be aware of our own prejudice all the time. Absolutely. So I tried to do that really quickly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, both of you. It was really nice to meet you, Raquel, and to see you again, Eric.
Of course.
And really great books, everybody. And please check them out at our website, 20% off with the discount code MET2021. So I'm going to introduce Linda now to go on to the next segment. So we can bring Linda on. And, Raquel, if you're still there, we want to see the dog at the end of it when she's nicely fed and rested. Linda Leith, I don't think we said this. She certainly didn't say it about herself, but she won the Governor General's Award last November. And I wanted to bring that up. The Order of Canada. She won the Order of Canada for her contribution to the art scene in Quebec, building bridges between English and French, for creating the Blue Metropolis, for moving on and creating LLP here. So that was a really big thing. And in her own modest way, it probably, it came and went, but we do remember it. And we're very proud of Linda, our own Order of Canada, running a Montreal literary house. So wherever she is, she's going to come here soon. There you are. Okay. Hi, Linda.
Hi there. Thank you, Leila.
So I'll say bye now.
Okay. Thank you for that. That was very nicely done. And thank you to Raquel Fletcher and Eric Deguire as well. I had no idea you two knew each other and have each other's books. I'm very touched by that. So we're moving into our last segment with 3 books with extraordinarily dramatic stories to tell about the human body, its frailties, and its strengths. And we're going to begin with, I'll introduce all of our writers and readers and then let them go at it. It's David Homel. Suffered great pain and writes about it very compellingly. After he lunged, when he was a very young man, he lunged into the underbrush in southern Spain. And this new book, which is called Lunging into the Underbrush, is his first memoir. And there it is.
There it is.
In a distinguished and award-winning writing career. In this memoir, David focuses on his long and painful recovery from that disastrous fall and on how he eventually turned into not only a fitness freak, but also a philosopher of life. Right, David?
If you say so, yes.
I would say so. And we're going to then bring in Fanie Demeule and her translator, Anita Anand, who is an author in her own right. Lightness is the title of Fanie's brilliantly concise and intense story about a young woman with serious body image issues. Fanie nous parlera de son roman et la nouvelliste Anita Anand lira un extrait de sa traduction du roman. And our other short story writer of the evening is Chih-Ying Lei.
Hello.
Who is born and raised in Taiwan and has a collection of extraordinary short stories called Homesickness. And the collection is translated by the Canadian translator, Daryl Stark, who is, he translated it from the Mandarin. He himself currently lives in Hong Kong and is unable to join us this evening. And so Chih-Ying is going to present his book and read a short excerpt. So over to you guys, and maybe David, I'll ask you to begin.
Okay, thanks. It's great to be here, even if here is not really here, but we're used to this by now, I think. Actually, there's a ray of hope. I had an invitation for a face-to-face reading for the first time in a hell of a long time. Anyway, I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs and then I'm going to tell you what's going on. This is, we're told to show this. This is Lunging into the Underbrush. A few years back, I was spending time with a friend named Vladimir Jovich, a psychiatrist, my psychiatrist. We were at his house overlooking the Danube, an hour north by road, north of Belgrade in Serbia, one of the countries that emerged from the breakup of the former Yugoslavia. His house lies in a fertile rural district, and the bluffs that dominate the Danube here made it a strategic location in the days when the river was the region's highway. Those bluffs were once a battlefield between the Christians and the Ottomans, one of the many confrontations that, little by little, led to the end of Ottoman domination in that part of Europe. The Ottomans lost the Battle of Slankamen some 5 years ago, Signs began appearing along the bluffs and in the rich agricultural land, describing and interpreting the scene of the battle. There's even an ugly concrete monument topped with a lightning rod. The signs are in Serbian and in English and were paid for by the Turkish government, yesterday's Ottomans. Now, why would the side that lost the battle and in the end the war, though their influence is everywhere in the region, pay for the signage broadcasting their defeat? This is normal, my friend Vladimir said. It is the battles that we lose that define who we are as nations and as individuals. And a little bit later on, my friend asked me why I had this kind of strange way of moving. It was 1970, I told Vladimir, and I had traveled to Paris just before my 18th birthday. This was for a year of study in the place rumored to be the literary, poetic, and romantic capital of the world, though, of course, it turned out to be none of those things. Paris is the capital of only one thing, Dr. Jovich declared, and that is narcissism. I had to agree with him based on my experience. Then I told him that my real mission was not to be a poet or to engage in foreign romance, good luck with the French girls, but to turn 18 on foreign soil and sign up for the Overseas Draft Board, from whom no one, it was said, was ever selected. For that was back in the days of Vietnam. The day after Christmas of that same year, I had a life-threatening accident and ended up being rescued and more or less patched together by the American military at the hospital on the naval base of Rota, west of the Rock of Gibraltar. My capsule story stimulated intense beard stroking from my psychiatrist friend, and then Vladimir spoke. So you ran away from the army, and where did you end up? In the arms of the military, which you needed in order to survive. Very interesting. You became a casualty of your own unwar. And so that's the very first page or so of Plunging into UNDERBRUSH. I think I've showed you that enough. And really what happens is that that's the kind of revelation scene in which I finally understand a couple of years ago that something that happened to me, that I made happen to myself in 1970, was really a kind of a lunging, a kind of act of self-destruction. I'm afraid to have to admit that to you. And that ever since that time, since 1970, I have been, after dying, but of course not entirely, as you can see, I have been bringing myself back to life little by little, becoming stronger, becoming fitter, becoming younger, and in fact, aging backwards. Now, this sounds like some kind of, I don't know, self-help book. But of course, it's not. And because there isn't any recipe, but it really is a story of this very strange set of circumstances of dying and then not dying at age 18, and then coming back and then really understanding something about how to handle aging and how to rejoice in your body and how to rejoice in how to attend to the battle between eros and melancholy. And of course, I'm going to choose eros, which is the life force, which is why I'm standing in front of you right now. So it is really a memoir. And actually, after 14 novels, I decided that maybe it was time to tell the truth. And actually, writing about myself turned out to be quite fun. And probably not the same autofiction that Madame Demeule is doing, but kind of something different and something attendant upon the body. So I think I'll just stop there and tell you that I'm still standing, as you can see, and still writing. And actually, there's no place I'd rather be than here.
Hi, I will follow up. Thank you so much, David. Thank you so much to Leila Marshy, to Linda Leith, to Anita Anand, as well as everybody tonight who is speaking and listening. I'm really glad to be here with you. Je vais parler en français parce que je suis vraiment meilleure en français. Mais si jamais vous avez des questions à m'adresser en anglais, sachez que je parle aussi en anglais. Alors, Déterrer les eaux est mon premier roman. Je l'ai écrit déjà il y a quelques années dans le cadre d'un mémoire de maîtrise en recherche-création que j'ai fait à l'Université de Montréal sous la direction exceptionnelle de l'autrice Claire Legendre. Et ce roman-là a été retravaillé avec mon éditeur Éric Simard et ça a donné Déterrer les eaux qui a été publié en 2016 aux éditions Hamac. Déterrer les eaux, c'est un roman, comme le dit David, c'est un roman d'autofiction dans lequel j'ai plongé dans mon vécu, principalement mon vécu à la fin de l'adolescence quand j'ai vécu l'anorexie. Mais ce roman-là va au-delà du trouble alimentaire au sens où on suit une protagoniste narratrice depuis sa naissance, littéralement, jusqu'à l'âge adulte et on voit à travers son quotidien qui est raconté par bribes dans une prose qui se veut assez incisive, assez près aussi des chairs, près de l'intimité, de la vulnérabilité du personnage. On voit en fait toute la relation au corps qui se déploie au fur et à mesure de sa vie, de ses petites ou grandes blessures qui se trament au cours de son existence. C'est un roman qui aborde donc la relation au corps au sens où le corps pour la protagoniste est vécu comme un enfermement. Très jeune, elle a excessivement peur de la mort. Elle développe vraiment une anxiété profonde avec tous les débordements corporels, que ce soit ses premières menstruations, les premières maladies. Donc, il y a vraiment tous les dérapages, les débordements du corps qui vont l'angoisser profondément et qui va faire en sorte qu'un jour, une manière pour elle de gérer cette anxiété-là, de gérer ce stress-là envers son corps, c'est, la plongée dans les troubles alimentaires qui sont dans le fond une forme d'automédication pour elle. Donc, on la suit comme ça à travers son vécu que j'ai voulu rendre de manière non apitoyante. En fait, de sortir de l'apitoiement puis du pathos puis de le rendre quand même avec une bonne touche d'autodérision. Puis, et c'est là où je vais enchaîner avec Anita. Je trouve que Anita, avec beaucoup de sensibilité, a porté mon texte, l'a transformé. Il a posé aussi son regard très quirky, son humour vraiment aussi incisif qu'on retrouve par ailleurs dans ses écrits. Donc, je suis vraiment excessivement fière et enchantée que ce soit elle qui en a fait la traduction. Donc, j'aimerais maintenant l'inviter à prononcer quelques mots et à lire aussi un extrait.
Que tu vas rester là parce que je veux t'adresser la parole. C'est when I first met Fanie, we had met just to sort of, like to meet each other and to talk about the book that I was in the middle of translating. That's what we were supposed to be talking about. But something weird happened. We didn't really move past the first topic, which was, where do you live? If you remember, Fanie, because she asked me where I lived, and I said I live in Saint-Lambert. And she said, oh, really? My boyfriend's family lives in Saint-Lambert. And she said, what street do you live on? And I said, I live on Sanford Avenue. And she said, what's the address? And then we learned that I was living, and I had been living since 2002, next door to her boyfriend's family, next door to her boyfriend's house, actually. And some of the scenes in the book that I was translating actually took place in that house, like just behind that wall there. And if I were the kind of person who spied on my neighbors, I might have actually witness some of the scenes that I actually translated. So it was quite strange, and I think we just sort of sat there in silence, like thinking, like, what does this mean? Does this mean there's fate? There's a god? Like, what's happening here? It was very surreal. My husband actually remembers Fanie riding up and down our street in front of our neighbor's house. The scene is described in the book. She's trying to get attention of the boy that lives in that house, whom I think she's been with ever since, like for 10 or 12 years or something.
Wait, c'est ça.
So that was really weird, and I never got a chance to tell Fanie how much I enjoyed her prose or what drew me to her book in the first place. I think she asked me, did you ever have an eating disorder? And actually, no. And it's like, why did you pick up my book then? It was like, well, I remember why. It's because my friends told me that you were a very good writer. And it's true. You are an amazing writer, actually. The book is a kind of strange acrobatic act where you combine heaviness and lightness, darkness and lightness. There's also a kind of yes. There's also kind of lightness. There's also kind of swiftness that goes through the book. Like, this is not a slow read. You don't sort of it's not a slow. It's a page turner, but it's not like the typical kind of page turner. It's not shallow. It's very deep, but it's a page turner maybe because there's a lot of swiftness. There's a lot of scenes of, for example, flying across the Jacques Cartier Bridge on a bicycle, running at the edge of the cliff in Ireland, diving underwater, and on and on. There's a lot of these very movingly beautiful images that stay with you, and I would say in a very sneaky way, because you read them and you're turning the pages, and then you go to bed at night and the images come back and you realize how well they've been painted. And I'm not actually going to read anything about the body. I'm going to read I'm going to read a scene that one of many that stayed with me. My grandfather reads to me. He tells me disquieting tales of ghosts, of a mechanical nightingale, and of an endless winter. Tales spangled with the sublime and with dread. He sings me songs. My grandfather sings, and the blue jays scream in the cedar trees near the lake. We walk around the big meadow in the shade of Mount Orford. I stuff myself with his stories, his words. I drown in them. They become as real as everything else. My mind begins to fill with their specters. Walking in the woods surrounding the cottage, I feel the tree's shadow on my skin. The old trunks squeak, and life swarms around me. Sometimes deep in the woods, there's a broken shell lying on the ground. And you can see a poor little chick inside, all curled up and shriveled, in the fields at the end of the road. Flowers blaze in the sunshine, and crushed grass snakes cook on the dirt roads. The water from the spring flows through my fingers, cold and silky, like no other. Muddy pebbles give way beneath my feet. I dislike looking at the seaweed at the bottom of lakes and streams. The sight of these long stretching arms claws at my stomach. I imagine myself buried under the mud at the roots, wrapped in their cool clamminess. I also hate seeing rocks emerging from the depths. Their black silhouette, sinisterly passive, unsettles me. I avoid looking below the water's surface. The swirling water grows dark, the forest quiet, and I return to the cottage. I open the fridge and stuff myself, filling the little holes that are growing inside me. My grandfather sits in his armchair and gradually begins to die from the inside. He laughs less and less, doesn't sing anymore, a slow, abrasive death, born somewhere in his kidneys. He doesn't know it yet. And that's it. Thank you so much to, it was a pleasure to work with Linda Leith and with Fanie on this book. I really enjoyed the process.
Thank you so much. I would like to bring, whoops. I would like to bring Chih-Ying into the conversation here. Can you hear me okay? There's a funny echo.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I also want to let David know there's a question for you, David, but we'll get to that in a bit. Right now, Chih-Ying, please present homesickness to us.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chih-Ying Lei, and this is my first book that has been translated into English, and I hear the echo. So, and this was a very special journey for me because we work on this book's translations project since like 5 years ago, and we're with Linda and Daryl, and later with Leila and Timothy. So it's quite a long way to get this published. And I'm very grateful that it can be published in English because I guess Linda take a very big risk of publishing this book because Taiwanese people in Canada is very shaded, and a lot of Canadian people don't really know Taiwan, and not even the literature work from Taiwan. So I feel very grateful to have this opportunity to talk here. And so this short story collection include my work from 2004 to 2007, and the stories were about the society after the Second World War in Taiwan, and to the modern, like maybe early 20s, something like that. Yeah. So I would like to say something in French as well. So, récemment, une de mes nouvelles, Libellule Rouge, était publiée par une maison d'édition française avec des auteurs ouvres, des écrivains taïwanaises. La collection s'appelle Formosana, Histoire de démocratie à Taïwan. So, si vous intéressez, ce livre juste chaque danseur, and you can have a tester in French as well, if you prefer to read that in French. Yeah, and also several days ago that I know that a publisher in US, they also published a short story collection, including the Red Dragonfly as well, and it's called A Song of Taiwan. So that's also including other Taiwanese writers' short stories. So so today for today's event, I prepare one page to read. That's from one of the short story called Quartet. And why I choose this short story, because the topic is for this session is the body language. And the main character of this short story actually cannot really move, so she has difficulty to use the body language. Okay, and also this is also the translator's favorite, so it's Daryl's favorite. So he told me that every time when he reread this story, he cried a lot. Also, because I'm also a music performer, and I think this short story presents some part of big part of my life, so I would like to read this short story. So this is the first page of that. The sound of Dr. Young's, your husband, footsteps walking away. You try not to hear, but you are already awake, brought to life again. Rebirth is hard. You remember when you were young, when you read about how they preserve mummies, taking out the organs and the brain for safekeeping, in preparation for revival in the time to come. It sounds painful. You have to hide in a dark crypt and remember which battle your liver's in, which your lungs. Then you rip a hole in your abdomen and put the organs back in place. At that point, you are like, forget it. No way. I'm coming back to life. That's your wish every night. Pity that when the lovely morning light wakes you up, it also wakes the pain in your body. They have to go to work. You want to pay them to go away, but it's no use. They're always busy. Because of you, you are their work. Okay, this is a paragraph I would like to read, and that represents the main character, how she think about her illness, and how she cannot really move her body like that. Okay, thank you, and thank you for the organizers, and I'm really thankful for being here. Thank you.
And David, I wonder if you've had a chance to look at the question for you. And there may be questions for Chih-Ying and for Fanie and Anita as well.
No, I don't see a question. Where should it be? Maybe you can read it.
Just looking for it. David, it's from Gina Reitman. Do you think that having lost your youth in a way prepared you for a better understanding of the value and of the process of aging?
Well, I lost my youth. I mean, I haven't lost it yet. I don't think so. Despite appearances, but one thing that this strange set of circumstances and this kind of catastrophic accident happened is that it's true. I realized I wasn't invincible, which is a good thing to learn because many young males and not so young males think they are invincible. But this gave me an opportunity really to rebuild myself, and that's really the impetus for this book. Actually began when one day, one more time, I was at the Park Avenue YMCA, and I thought to myself, "Why am I doing this all the time? You know, what am I doing here?" And I really did realize that what I was doing was I was getting younger. I was rebuilding myself. I was going against the normal process of time. So I recommend it to everybody. But as I say, it's not a self-help book. It's not a recipe, because I'm not recommending that everybody throw themselves off a cliff in southern Spain. you know, because it might not work out for everybody. I mean, I managed on the way down to say, okay, I'm going to land this way, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do minimum damage. But minimum damage turned out to be, you know, a lot after all. Anyway, I can't hear you, Linda.
Oh dear. Can you
Now
hear
you're
me
there.
now?
Yes.
Okay, good. I know there's been some funny sound activity. Okay, nice comment from Katia that this is the literary event at which David Homel did not recommend that people throw themselves off a cliff in Spain.
Yes, I'm not recommending that, but I am recommending, you know, working on your body image problems. And the book says that really for those of us who are a bit older, that those women who have body image problems and those men who have performance anxiety problems, that they should get together and perhaps make some kind of alliance.
Well, there's a solution to the ills of humanity.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm really sorry because I think this has been so lovely. I've been happy to see all of you, to hear all of you, but time has been moving on, and I'm sorry to say we're probably going to have to draw this to an end. Merci beaucoup, Chih-Ying. Thank you, David. Thank you, Anita. Merci, Fanie. I think that we're going to, I want to just thank you all for presenting your books so well. And, you know, I worked on all of those books and I have enjoyed them all. And sometimes it is just a pleasure to have a chance to see you all bask in your writerly glories. I want to thank Deanna Radford, who's been toiling away in the background here, trying to make sure that we are all able to see and hear each other. I want to thank Leila Marshy, who did a lot of work organizing this event. Leith Éditions est reconnaissant au Conseil des Arts du Canada, au Fonds du Livre du Canada et à la SODEC pour leur appui financier. On remercie la Fondation Métropolis Bleue pour leur accueil ce soir. I want to thank everybody who joined us for this event, and I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. These wonderful books, and they are all wonderful books, are on sale right now at Paragraph Books, and if you click that little green button at the bottom of your screen, you can buy it from our website at a 20% discount by using a discount code MET2021. Go for it. There has never been a better time to catch up on your reading. Merci à vous toutes et tous. À la prochaine. I will look forward to seeing you next year.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you.
À la prochaine. Who knows?